Okay, so if you've been getting little bits of pension news thrown at you from different places lately, a headline here, a comment from a neighbor there, and none of it quite adds up. I get it, because the WPA has quietly been putting pieces of a new approach into place, and when you line them all up together, it actually paints a pretty different picture than what most people think is coming. I've spent a good chunk of time going through this, and I want to walk you through it properly, in plain English, no jargon, no scare tactics, just what's actually happening. Here's a taste of what we're covering today. There's a change to how your payment amount gets decided every year, and it's not as simple as prices go up, so pension goes up. There's a shift in who actually gets extra help, and it might not be who you'd expect. There's something happening with the actual date your money lands in. Your account. There's a review that could quietly move the goalposts on when you're even allowed to claim, and there's one detail near the end that genuinely surprised me when I found it, because it affects people who don't think this applies to them at all. So stick with me, because point for especially a lot of people are going to want to know that one before they make any decisions this year. Let's start at the beginning. You've probably heard the phrase triple lock thrown around. Here's what it actually means, stripped of all the political noise. Each year, the government looks at three numbers: how much wages have grown, how much prices have gone up, that's inflation, and a flat 2.5%. Whichever of those three numbers is highest, that's the percentage your state pension goes up by the following April. Sounds simple, right? Here's the part that surprises people. This isn't a law of physics. It's a policy commitment, reviewed and reconfirmed government by government. It has been protected through multiple administrations, but every year there is genuine debate in Westminster about whether it's affordable long term, because pensions are one of the biggest single areas of government spending there is. Why does this matter to you? Because it means your increase isn't guaranteed to feel generous every single year. Some years wages spike and you get a nice bump. Other years, if wage growth and inflation are both low, you might only get that 2.5% floor, which, if prices have crept up more than that in daily life, can feel like standing still while everything around you gets more expensive. I think this is the bit that quietly worries a lot of people. Not that the pension is disappearing, it isn't, but that the size of next year's rise can feel like a bit of a lottery until it's actually announced. And that uncertainty is exactly why so many people are trying to figure out what's coming next. Which brings us to the second update, and this one is about who's actually getting extra support right now, because it's not as universal as people assume. Here's a number that genuinely stopped me when I first saw it. There are hundreds of thousands of pensioners in the UK who are entitled to pension credit and simply aren't claiming it, not because they don't need it, because they don't realize they qualify. Let me explain what it actually is, because the name makes it sound more complicated than it is. Pension credit is a top-up for people on a lower income once they've reached state pension age. If your weekly income falls below a certain threshold, the government tops it up to that level, and here's the part most people don't know. Even a small award of pension credit, just a few pounds a week, can act like a golden key. It can unlock other things too. Help with housing costs, a reduction on your council tax, help with heating costs in winter, and even free NHS dental treatment. So why does this matter so much right now? Because WPA has been actively pushing to close that gap between who's eligible and who's actually claiming. There have been outreach campaigns, changes to how easy the application is, even data matching efforts to identify people who look eligible based on other information the government already holds. And here's the emotional bit, because I think it's worth sitting with for a second. If you know someone, a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor who's just scraping by and has never checked this, that's genuinely worth 10 minutes of their time. Not because it's a huge windfall necessarily, but because of everything else it can quietly unlock behind it. Now, knowing you're entitled to money is one thing, but when that money actually lands in your account is its own story, and this next part catches people out every single year without fail. Have you ever had that little flicker of panic when your payment doesn't show up on the day you expected it? You check your account, nothing's there, and for a second your stomach drops. Here's what's actually going on, and it's much less dramatic than it feels in the moment. WPA pension payments are made through the banking system, and the banking system doesn't run on weekends or bank holidays. So if your normal payment date falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or a bank holiday, the payment doesn't get delayed until after. It gets moved earlier to the last working day before it. That means over the course of a year, especially around Christmas, New Year, and Easter, your payment dates can shift around in a way that feels confusing if you're not expecting it. You might get paid a few days early one month and then have a longer gap than usual before the next one. Why does this matter? Because if you're budgeting carefully, and let's be honest, a lot of people on a fixed income absolutely are, that shifted timing can throw off your whole month if you don't see it coming. Bills go out on their normal schedule even when your income doesn't. The reassuring part is this: nothing is actually being cut or withheld. It's purely a calendar mechanic, but knowing it in advance means you can plan around it instead of being caught off guard. Now, dates and amounts are one thing, but there's a bigger question a lot of people in their 50s and early 60s are quietly worried about, and it's this next one. This is the one that tends to make people nervous, so let's take it slowly and calmly. The age at which you can start claiming your state pension isn't fixed in stone forever. It's periodically reviewed, and those reviews look at things like life expectancy trends, the ratio of working age people to retired people, and the overall cost of the system. Right now, we already know the state pension age is on a path to rise to 67 for people born after a certain point, with a further rise to 68 currently expected, but with its timing still under discussion. The government carries out formal reviews every few years to reassess whether that timeline needs to move. Here's why this matters even if you think you're far from retirement. If you're in your 40s or 50s right now, the age at which you can claim might not be the same age your parents claimed at. And the frustrating part is that these decisions can take years to finalize, which leaves a long stretch of uncertainty for anyone trying to plan ahead. I'll be honest with you, this is the update that tends to spark the most anxiety in the comments whenever it comes up, and I understand why. Not knowing the exact goalposts makes it hard to plan your own retirement date with confidence. But stay with me, because the next point is the one that surprised me the most when I dug into it, and it's about a group of people who often assume none of this applies to them at all. Here's something that genuinely caught me off guard. A lot of people assume that once they've moved abroad, or if they're planning to retire somewhere warmer, that the rules around their state pension increases work the same everywhere. They don't. If you retire to a country within the EU or certain other countries with specific agreements in place with the UK, your pension continues to rise each year with the triple lock, just as if you'd stayed in the UK. But if you retire to certain other countries, Australia and Canada are the most commonly cited examples, your pension can get frozen at the rate it was when you first started claiming it or when you first moved, and it simply doesn't go up from there year after year, potentially for the rest of your life. Let that sit for a second. Two people can start with the exact same pension amount, and years later, depending purely on which country they chose to retire to, one of them could be receiving noticeably more than the other, simply because of where they live. Why does this matter so much? Because if retiring abroad is even a small possibility on your radar, this is exactly the kind of detail that needs checking before you make any big decisions, not after. It's one of those quiet rules that barely gets talked about, but it can make a genuinely significant difference over a 20 or 30-year retirement. Now, let's bring all of this together, because on their own each of these points is useful, but it's when you see them side by side that the fuller picture really starts to make sense. So here's where we've ended up. Your payment amount each year depends on the triple lock, and that's a genuine policy commitment, but it's reviewed and debated every single year, not a fixed guarantee of a big rise. There's real extra support sitting unclaimed in pension credit for a huge number of people who simply don't know they qualify, and that one's worth checking today, not someday. Your actual payment dates shift around bank holidays and weekends, which is completely normal and nothing to panic about once you know the pattern. The state pension age itself is under ongoing review, which matters most if you're not retired yet and trying to plan ahead. And if retiring abroad is anywhere on your future plans, where you go can quietly determine whether your pension keeps rising or gets frozen in place. None of this is the DWP trying to catch anyone out. Honestly, most of it comes down to a system that's genuinely complicated, and a government that doesn't always do a great job of explaining it clearly to the people it affects most. Here's the hopeful part, though. Every single one of these points is something you can actually do something about. You can check your pension credit eligibility in a few minutes. You can plan your budget around known payment date shifts instead of being surprised by them. You can keep an eye on state pension age announcements instead of assuming today's rules will still apply years from now. And if a move abroad is ever on the table, you can check the rules before you go instead of finding out the hard way. You don't need to memorize every detail of how WPRA policy works. You just need to know where to look and know which questions to actually ask. That's really the whole point of walking through all this together. If this helped clear things up even a little, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because I'm going to keep tracking these updates as they develop and break them down the same way. No jargon, no scare tactics, just what you actually need to know. And if there's someone in your life this might help, a parent, a grandparent, a friend, who's getting close to retirement, send this their way. It might just save them some money, or at the very least, save them a bit of stress. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. I'll see you in the next video.